So I'm here in Savannah, Georgia for my oldest college graduation tonight. Super excited for her. Finished out top of her class, bunch of honors, totally excited about this. And in the time she's been here, she and I have talked about, should I buy a place here in Savannah, a duplex, she rents out half, and she rents out the other half, she maintains it, and it becomes an investment. Which brings me to the question, is now the time to buy real estate? Real estate's at all-time highs. Lending and leverage is all-time highs. But do you buy real estate now? In this video, I'm gonna break down what I think about real estate now and how to look at it for future purchases. What do you buy a house with? You buy it with dollars, right? Here in the US, you buy it with US dollars. If you live in England, you buy it with pounds. Or in Italy, you buy them with lira. You buy them with the currency of your country, right? Okay. But what about if that currency isn't buying as much as it did, say a year ago, or 5 years ago, or 21 years ago? Then what? What is that house now really costing you? Since 2008, we have heard the word quantitative easing, or QE, from the federal government. What is this? Well, this is the federal government injecting liquidity, or US dollars, into the system to keep it afloat. It's like putting oil in your engine, in your car. If your engine doesn't have oil, your car will seize up and cost you a whole lot of money. It'll break down. You'll be stuck on the side of the road. Well, it's the same with the government and the same with our system. If we don't have enough liquidity, the system freezes up. Which brings up the question, if they can just inject money into the system, what is that backing up the value of that money? Prior to the Nixon administration, the US dollar was backed by gold. Fort Knox is full of gold, and though that gold bars backed the value of the US dollar. Then Nixon basically took us off the gold standard. And what that did was it gave the government, the Federal Reserve, the ability to print money and create liquidity during crises like we saw during the financial crisis and quantitative easing. It's the printing of money. Whereas if you had it still backed by gold, you would have to find more gold or purchase more gold to back the US dollar. Instead, today, the US dollar is backed by the credit of the United States. Having that ability to print money has allowed the Federal Reserve to create liquidity. When we, as the United States, need money, we are able to, the Treasury goes to the Fed, sells treasuries to the Fed, and then the Fed buys those treasuries, turns around and sells them to their prime brokers or prime dealers. And then those prime dealers dispense them out to banks. And then banks lend that money, making more money on top of the money the Federal Reserve just printed to go buy the treasuries from the Treasury. Wow. Essentially, people are basing their decision to use the US dollar based on the ability of the United States to pay back the debt it owes. The question is, how long does that last? And the producing of dollars, the printing of them, as Ben Bernanke, former federal chairman, stated, we just enter a number into a computer and it miraculously creates dollars. Don't you wish you could just type in a number into your computer and print dollars? I mean, the US government does it. My question is, how does that affect housing? And should it be a determining factor on if you buy a house or more real estate now or later on? Here's something that's really interesting. If you go back to the year 2000 and you look at the amount of money that the federal government has printed, and you look at the value of our US dollar, and you look at the cost of housing and how it's gone up, what you'll realize is in 2000 compared to 2000, your dollar today has the ability to buy 47% of what it could have bought back in 2000, meaning real estate has gone up in value over 53%, meaning if you don't buy today and they continue to print, it'll be more expensive for you to buy a place or a piece of real estate in the next couple of years. And I don't think most people understand that. Since 2008, when quantitative easing came about and we have had all this money injected in the system, they're merely just printing the money. There is no hard asset that backs it up. So by flooding the market with more supply of money, creating liquidity like oil in an engine of a car, you're diluting the cost, the value of the dollar. And this is where, if you're not in an asset that outruns the Federal Reserve's 15% increase in its balance sheet each year, you're actually losing money, which gives you a reason why the rich keep getting richer. That is, they buy assets that go up in value over and above the 15% that the Federal Reserve continues to expand its balance sheet and print the amount of US dollars in the system. So how do you buy a house in 2 years if you know the value of the US dollar is going to deplete by probably 30%? Well, you buy assets that outgrow the depletion or the depletion of the US dollar. And what assets have those been? Well, since 2008, the rich seem to be getting richer and the middle class and poorer seem to be getting poorer. What are they doing that the rich aren't doing? Well, number one, they're not buying real estate, which has outrun the inflating or the deflation of the dollar. The other element or thing they're buying is, I know you're gonna roll your eyes, so get your eyes rolling, but they're buying Bitcoin because Bitcoin has been growing at a 230% annual rate since 2009. So if you're gonna buy a house or a piece of real estate in the coming years, you need to be thinking, how do I get my US dollars to grow faster than the deflating of the US dollar? And if you think of it from the perspective of you need to be exceeding a 15% hurdle each year, it leaves you really with only a handful of things that will inflate over and above. One, stock market, aggressive growth positions. Bonds are not going to get you there. You're actually losing money in bonds. And number two, the whole crypto world. I mean, I totally understand if you're like, I'm sick and tired of hearing about cryptocurrency. I don't believe it, I don't understand it, I don't get it. But it is an asset that was designed to outrun the deflating of dollars and central banks throughout the world who are also deflating their dollars. They're just printing more. They don't have hard assets behind them anymore like we did prior to the Nixon administration with gold. This is where you have to really start thinking, if I wait until, like somebody stated in one of my comments in one of my videos, that they're going to wait until Biden gets out of office, chances are the cost for you to buy a house will be much, much more than it is today. Unless you buy an asset that out-inflates a deflating US dollar. Here's how you think of this. If you go back to 2000 and to now, the US dollar has deflated by 53%. The cost of a home has gone up over and above what the US dollars have deflated. And part of that is the cost of goods to build it, but it is also the power to buy those goods. So as you're building your portfolio and your ideas about building or buying real estate, you have to consider that you're outrunning the deflating asset that you would purchase that home with or that piece of real estate. So here's how I'm thinking about it. If I buy an asset that will outrun the deflating of the US dollar, and I can then catch the housing market on a lull, and there's a good chance we may see that, then I will be able to buy more real estate with the dollars that inflated, because I bought assets that inflated and out-inflated the deflating of the US dollar. If I can't do that, well, then I probably shouldn't be buying real estate at that time, because I'm actually paying more for that piece of real estate based on my thesis here. Here's another thing to think about. If you borrow the money to buy that piece of real estate, you have to factor in the cost of that borrowed money. And right now, interest rates are low, mortgage rates are reasonable, and they're very, very low. So when you're figuring out this calculation of how much you have to get in return in an asset to outgrow the deflation of our dollar, the buying power of the dollar, and the cost of borrowing that money down the road, these are things you got to calculate into this. Because in the end, if you can figure this out, and you can buy assets that will inflate or grow faster than the deflation of the dollar, and you can borrow money cheap down the road, well then buy the asset, in this case real estate, at a low, you actually will come out ahead. And I believe this is what the professional real estate guys are really thinking about, is how do I outpace the Federal Reserve's printing of the dollar and flooding and overflooding the market with US dollars. And this is where I keep going back to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. See, Bitcoin is a fixed number of coins, 21 million. There is no printing of more Bitcoins. There's no increasing the amount of Bitcoins. It's just 21 million. So it is like the US dollar was prior to coming off the gold standard. You had to have enough gold to back the number of dollars that you had. And so it was legitimate, it was solid, it was fixed. That's what Bitcoin is. And my thinking is that if I buy Bitcoin and it goes up in value, and let's say it just stays on the pace that it's been on since 2009, well then that asset is going to be worth much, much more. And once we see a downturn or a leveling off in the real estate market, I'll be able to take that asset, put more down on the piece of real estate I want to buy, but also borrow that money at a much cheaper rate and have the housing that I just bought or real estate I just bought, which historically will inflate faster than the deflation of the dollar. Does that make a lot of sense? I think it does, and hopefully you can get your head around this. But what I want you to really think about is what you're purchasing with and the assets you're buying. Are they outpacing the currency that you're actually buying those assets with? And if it isn't, then you're actually losing value and money. And this is where I look at the retirement world, retirees, and the lack of aggressiveness that a lot of retirees take because of, volatility in markets. And I look at this and I go, you're not outpacing inflation. And inflation is the amount of money the U.S. Federal Reserve is actually printing. They're inflating cost of goods. And if you're not outpacing that, how can you live in a comfortable retirement? Much less actually buy a piece of real estate.